Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Millennial Kingdom stuff. As far as that we're in the short season, and there's some things that come to mind with this that I wanted to touch on. It's kind of like when it comes to the Millennial Kingdom and the United States and stuff like that, for instance. So first you have the Greco-Roman buildings and the cathedrals all throughout America, the Gothic buildings all throughout America, and castles. What you'll find I just want to talk about America right now. So you'll find that in our history, supposedly we came here in 1492, and before then we thought we were going to fall off the side of the earth, which is kind of ridiculous. Okay, you'll kind of find that things taking place in regards to the Civil War has been kind of hoaxery, that all of the photography came from two guys, and some of them have been falsified, that they were mannequins or fake bodies or set up situations. And a lot of the guns that they say they used in the Civil War, they were never even fired, and they really don't even know, they're not even accurate or anything. They really couldn't really work really well anyway. And then what made me as a child think that was what was crazy is they always would tell you that they would just stand against each other in a line and just fire until everybody was dead, and whoever was left standing, it was like a pride thing they would say or something like that. Basically if there were in the past red coats and blue coats or whatever the heck they were, they would just sit there and shoot. That to me is kind of doesn't make any sense. It's kind of a lot of times they try to go back into our history and make us believe that we were really really cavemen, and up until say the 1800s, it took us before we could really start thinking for ourselves. We didn't have common sense before then. Or for instance, the way they would do paintings in the past, they would do these big people with smaller heads sometimes, especially when they would be paintings of the saints or people you'd see with halos around them, and they would say that we didn't understand how to paint or draw with symmetry we learned later or something. They try to pawn it off as we just were cavemen then, even when it came to art and stuff. But what I postulate to you is that the people they show that are saints with the halos, and they had the bigger bodies and say the little bit of a smaller head, or it was a little bit different, is that's actually what they actually looked like, and that they were the saints. The people you see with the halos that typically you'll see in the Catholic Church and stuff, I believe were really literally the saints, than that they were real true paintings of them. And you'll find that they made some of the best artwork then, the best music then, and you'll find that the hertz from the music changed as well. But getting back to America, they say that all of the Greco-Roman Gothic cathedral type stuff, that we just built imitation, replicas, and in the Gilded Age and stuff like that. But you're gonna find the Biltmore is the largest home in America or something. That thing, all of the history behind these buildings and things, they're not and all these dome buildings, they're fake narratives, and they were built very quickly according to the historical narrative. A lot of times what you'll find is if there is a photo of it, if they said they built it in a time in and after cameras, you'll find that it'll be either all the way up and built, and they'll say this was a construction photo because around it the infrastructure was kind of dirt, and there was the structures around it and things around it was all broke up. But what I believe it is you're going to build infrastructure up to the building. You're not going to build the infrastructure completely after. It's just kind of weird how you'll see something in the middle of a mud dirt field. You'll see a beautiful like dome building in these pictures or something, and this monstrosity partially buried underground, and then they're going to tell you that that's the construction photo of it. There's not even, like, for instance, like gravel driveway to it or anything, because like during the mud flood after the Millennial Kingdom ended, everything sunk, and what really sunk mainly was a lot of the infrastructure, as far as, say, the roads and the sidewalks and things like that. They sunk in the mud, you know, and in the dirt and stuff. I believe a rapture occurred because there's no dead bodies anywhere. And a lot of times, well, you'll find that there's a lot of cities in America where they have a floor underground, and they'll say it's because they had to put like sewage in. So they had to put sewage in, or they had problems with flooding, so they just would just do different things. They would say they'd raise these buildings. We're talking about a building the size of a square block sometimes, that these guys would have these little jacks and jack the building up. It's just crazy stuff, the stories and the narratives behind it. But you understand, this is a spiritual orchestration in the physical realm. So it's not just humanity doing this. This is kind of like a hive mind or a one-mindedness that is evil, and it's all almost like if there was like a Wi-Fi they were all connected to, and say the enemy had a plan, it would all like shoot out to all of the evil illuminists. Or let's say if they were, we don't wrestle with flesh or blood, right? We wrestle with principalities and powers in high places and stuff. So for instance, if it would, the Wi-Fi or whatever, it would shoot out to all of the people that look like us, but they're not us. It's almost like that movie that is, what is it called? They Live, where the guy found the glasses and he put the glasses on, and then some people, Roddy Piper was in it, a lot of people, some people were aliens, but they just were cloaked with a human frame or whatever. And there was a frequency that was let out that kept them cloaked, and they had to take the tower down, right? So I think that there's something like that. It's like, if, you know, Christ has a body of Christ, then Satan is going to be the opposite of the same framework, because that's how he is. They're both lions, right? Jesus is the lion of the tribe of Judah, but the enemy is the lion roaring and going around through the earth, seeing who he may devour. You know, they're both lights, right? It's like he's like the enemy is the morning star or something like that, and then Jesus is the bright in the morning star or something, you know. So it's like he's the carbon copy of Christ. So it's like, if Christ has a body, you got to know that the enemy does too, and Christ would rule the body, and the true body would operate, you know, maybe even not even without knowing, but it would just kind of work as an extension of him. And so that the enemy has the same power, you know, on the dark side. And that's how I think he rules in this system. And nobody gets caught, nobody tells on each other and stuff like that, because it's all like a control. The enemy is always about power and control, just like the narcissist. And so when you look at America, for instance, what really gets it for me is as a child, I used to look at the wars and how they would just shoot each other dead, and then they'd say, well, it was a pride thing. To me, I don't care, man. If you're going to kill me, I don't care how much pride you have. I'm not going to just stand there and get shot and killed. I'm going to run, duck, and camouflage myself. So that never made sense to me, even as a little child. And I'm not going to wear bright colors to get shot, or play a horn and drums to get shot. That's one thing. Number two that always killed me was when they would say like the Great Lakes was just like glaciers that melted, or from years and years ago, or something like even the Grand Canyon. I believe that something else was going on. I want to say that even in like the 1500 maps and stuff like that, the Great Lakes were even way different looking than they do today. So, or the 1600s, like before the mud flood. And something occurred possibly in the Grand Canyon area, whether it was cities down there that got melted in the fervent heat. Some people believe that. Some people believe it was a place that people mined, for instance, maybe giants of old. I because it does look like it was a mining center, or what could have been a few people have postulated that it could have been a huge lake post Noah's Ark, and it took up several states. And then when like the mud flood occurred after the Millennial Kingdom ended and Satan was loose, that it actually was held in by like the frame of the dirt, and everything was what housed it to some degree, dammed it in, and that the mud flood liquefied and caused a huge lake the size of several states to bust, and that also caused the shores of the ocean to rise and to add to the catastrophe during the mud flood, or the time that the enemy was loose for the short season. And liquefaction is what it's called. It is a scientific thing, and it's been done several times based on that pressure and sound, where it will cause the ground to shake and mix with the aquifers underneath and turn to liquid. It's happened in cities and small spots and stuff, but this was a worldwide mud flood that occurred. So all the buildings are sunk in the mud, and so that's like and this is a worldwide catastrophe because it happened everywhere, all the buildings all over the earth. And if you dig them out, which in some cities and some countries have, and they have photos and they have stories about them, that they didn't know they went down a floor or two deeper. A lot of times they would put a door into a second floor building. They would build stairs up to the second floor. That's because you wouldn't typically build stairs going up, or they would dig them out and build stairs going into the ground and say that it was a basement. But they didn't build basements back then. They didn't have any like bulldozers and stuff. They're not going to be digging out stuff like that. And the way they were built and the way they would go down is crazy. It's obvious that the building sunk in the mud. And then you see that all of these buildings are all owned by either the church or the government, the heads of state, okay, which would be the kingdoms. And these jails, a lot of these prisons, and you'd see insane asylums or mental hospitals, churches, government buildings, and the prisons out in the middle of nowhere, or these insane asylums or hospitals, places like military complexes, that they're obvious that they were repurposed because they were like old castles or stuff, but they do look a little creepy because they don't have like the glory of God on them. And I do believe that, you know, some people have talked about the gargoyles or stuff, that the artwork that's on them, a lot of it has been redone. You'll find a lot of these buildings, they're in the history that they were wiped clean of whatever was on there, the pictures or the stuff that was carved into it, and they'd recarve or, you know, put something else that was evil there, like gargoyles and stuff. I also believe that if something went from the Millennial Kingdom, which was like a time of holiness, and then like Christ left and it went back to a sinful territory, that a lot of that stuff would get cloaked in sin, and it would go from, like, if it was say a sculpture that was, say, a heavenly sculpture, then when sin got cloaked on it again, you know, the mold would land on the buildings, the age would come onto the buildings, a lot of the equipment from, like, say, the Millennial Kingdom and Christ's reign, his glory would make the equipment work, that it wouldn't work anymore. And then the art and stuff may change as well, because now we have it cloaked with sin again. It's kind of like a mosquito in the Garden of Eden wouldn't bite you, but because it got cloaked in sin, now it does. A lion wouldn't kill you in the Garden of Eden, but now it does. Man and woman wouldn't eat flesh, as far as like animal flesh, in the Garden of Eden, because they never killed anything. But then after sin occurred, they did. And so when sin came back onto the earth, it's kind of like a car wouldn't rust in heaven, it wouldn't put off pollution in heaven, but on earth it rusts, it depreciates, and everything ages. So I kind of go with that concept, although also things have changed. There's those arch of triumphs, they're all over the earth, and people believe that those were used for something that we don't know back in history. But what really kills me is this: there's places like Detroit, Michigan, where they have the largest amount of buildings over 20 stories that are abandoned and are city buildings, and a lot of those, when you look at them, I don't think that we built them. The architecture is really beautiful, and they lay abandoned because after the Millennial King ended and Satan took back, you know, the world, they had to burn down a lot of these cities, or they almost looked like they got hit with an impact weapon or something, because they were like made of granite and stone and marble and all this like stone and glass work and things that wouldn't really catch on fire like wood would, and they look like they burned down to the ground, man. And if you look into the history of the fires that happened in the 1800s anywhere in the world, especially America, every major city burned down. And when you see some of the photos, it's almost like when you read the history of Boston, for instance, it burned down, and it talked about that the granite and the stone and stuff was melting. I mean, we're talking about like, how hot would it have to get for that to happen? But this is kind of the type of stuff that you would hear about, and they were just tearing down a lot of big structures back then. If you look into the real history of things in the narrative, if you read it from way back when. But what also kills me is like they would talk about, I think they just had a lot of buildings left over that they didn't know what to do with, because there wasn't very many people as we repopulated this. They had to get rid of them. They were built for giants. I mean, like people, the saints were taller and bigger and greater than us to live 1,000 years. Of course, like I said, I do believe they're still around at the North Pole, maybe for the War of Gog and Magog, the very end, which looks like another tribulation type thing occurring, you know, right? Another new world order occurring, but they rule out of chaos. So it's been a new world order forever. If Satan offered the kingdoms, all the kingdoms of the earth to Jesus Christ, if he bowed down to him 2,000 years ago, or whatever, 1,200 years ago, because they added like 800 to 1,000 years to the calendar, then it would have to be true, or else it wouldn't be like a temptation. So if he ruled them all then, he rules them all now. They rule out of chaos. The narcissist operates opposite of humanity, just like Satan does Christ. So when we love, their love is power and control. Our love is true love. So it's like when they rule out of chaos, and we rule out of order to order. They're chaos out of order. Chaos. Their order is chaos. That's how they rule it. And so what looks like a bunch of different countries fighting each other, hating each other, they're really not at all. It's just a stage. But also what gets me is like they would say a lot of people were dying in the cold and the wilderness of America after, you know, the Columbus thing and the Pilgrims and all that. Well, why would they be so stupid to like move to New York and Virginia? Why wouldn't they move to like Florida? I mean, it wouldn't make sense. If everything's freezing and you're dying because it's too damn cold, wouldn't it be smarter to just, I mean, I even think Columbus came from down that way, because didn't he, or he went down that way, because I think he also found like Jamaica and places like that. But I mean, why would you not be, if they probably had to know about the equator back then, so why would you go way up in the freezing cold and try to build an empire then? That to me never made sense. And that's why what you'll find is up north, it's full and very more populated than the south. Well, why is that? I'll tell you why it is. Because there was a Millennial Kingdom, and it didn't have ice or snow on any of the maps for 1,000 years, because in Isaiah it would talk about it would be 7 times the sunlight during the time of the rule of Christ in the millennial reign, the Millennial Kingdom. And so there was more people living up north, and I think this is God just telling the truth in the narrative. He gives hints, and this is why one of these is a hint, is that the north is populated. Why would they populate the cold region? They wouldn't. They would go down to the south. They would go to Florida, and they would populate that, and they would also have better chances of survival. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that right there in itself doesn't add up. You see places like New Orleans underwater. That's because the mud flood occurred and it caused that. California was an island. It attached because of the mud flood. And, you know, places like that. But when you find a lot of these things, man, you got to relook at this architecture. It's in New York City. It's everywhere. When I used to go to New York City, I used to look at these buildings like, how did we build these things? We can't build these structures today. Like that gridiron building or whatever it is, Flatiron building in New York City, that's a Millennial Kingdom leftover. And that, they say, goes down in the ground up to 110 feet. And it just continues to get wider. That they said that it continues, their stories upon stories in the basements. They just continue to go down. And it's because it all sunk in the mud, man. And And that's why all the technology seemed to ramp up in the 1800s. But let me tell you something now. People that say, oh, that God wouldn't allow this or whatever, well, somebody is going to have to live in the post-millennial kingdom. Somebody. And why wouldn't it be us? Why wouldn't it? I mean, they wouldn't know, because if they knew, they wouldn't really need to have too much faith to believe in Christ. So to me, it was going to be God was going to allow it to be a deception to some degree. As far as the timeline, I believe has always been a deception to humanity. That the enemy always used it, always had the ability to do that. But anyway, I just wanted to talk on those few things because it's interesting, because when you look out west and stuff, it took them a long time to get the mapping out west from like Meriwether Lewis and Clark, remember? And then one of them got killed, I think, in a really weird way. But they were Freemasons. All the control comes from people that say they were Freemasons, but it couldn't just be humanity. It couldn't just operate like that. It's the spiritual realm operating. That's why it says that they are a hierarchy of the spirit working, and you're not dealing with flesh itself. Anyway, if you can give me a like, subscription, and thumbs up, I'm going to talk more about some of this stuff. But full-on deserts that were full cities. Siberia was like where it's really cold. There was full-on cities, and there was no ice and snow. There was no deserts then. But you'll find that like the pyramids were even dug out in the 1800s, or Easter Island was dug out in the 1800s. Why? We were too dumb to find it before? We just died of all these plagues, but then we built all these amazing structures. But then we haven't built, these cities were built out for millions upon millions of people, but they didn't need a bathroom until like the 1860s, when everybody was pissing and crapping all over the place and dying of cholera, and we had to figure it out. But they had running water and filtration during the time of the crucifixion of Christ. So how did it stop? And it's because during the 1,000-year reign of millennial reign of Christ, they did not have to go to the restroom. It's obvious. They didn't have to eat to survive. They ate because maybe they wanted to. Anyway, thank you so much. If you have any questions or comments or thoughts, or if you want me to talk on a subject about this, let me know in the comments, because I'm willing. I know the Bible will show through that this is true. There's too much evidence for it not to be. I've spent 6 or 7 years on this, but they're just continually, a lot of these wars are destroying cities and carpet bombing them to get rid of this structure, because if they don't get rid of this infrastructure over time, or change it or adjust it to make it look more cheesy and modern like they do today, we build nothing but fake stuff, fake wood, fake tile, fake siding, plastic siding. I mean, we build crap today. They built genuine stuff, and they're continually destroying it because they don't want you to figure it out. Thank you. Bye.